Hey everyone, welcome to the very last session of Poetry is Prayer, part one. Thank you, Kathy, for joining me and for um, sticking to the method of this course. Today we're going to tackle Ars Poetica, so it's kind of like a celebration of our writing practice, which I feel, as poets is very important, and sometimes we forget to celebrate ourselves. Often I feel we forget to celebrate ourselves and, you know, our achievements, no matter how small they seem or how hard or not hard we work towards them. And I have a quote by Fiona Sampson to start our session, and it goes like this. Poems are like touchstones, and we approach the making of them like touchstones too. There's a continuous sequence running from the very first poem that interested you, perhaps in childhood, to the one you'll write today. The sequence is always opening up ahead of us, as both poets and readers, and is different for everyone. I thought that was quite particular for today and very interesting to think of the very first poem that interested you. Maybe in childhood, but maybe later. So let's start with our visualization and then we'll get to that again, the very first poem. So let's close our eyes together and start by taking 3 deep breaths. Inhale, hold at the top. 3, 2, 1. Exhale. Inhale, fill the tummy and the chest. 3, 2, 1. Exhale. Empty it all out. Big inhale. Hold on the top. 3, 2, 1. Long exhale. Now bringing your breathing back to its normal pattern and keeping your eyes closed. I want you to imagine that you're in a dark room. It is a familiar room. You feel comfortable, you feel safe. But you feel that you are in the presence of something that is larger than you, something deep, maybe spiritual, something important. And as you kind of sit in this presence, you start to feel how it nourishes you, it motivates you, it brings words out of you. This presence is your poem. The poem you will write today, the poem that is inside of you waiting to come out. And since it's just you and the poem in this room, try to understand it. Try to kind of feel around for it. Without seeing it, you need to believe that this poem will come to life. And try to understand what the poem is about or what the poem is for, even. What question is it asking? And since you understand that it is precious, keep it close to you. And as you keep it close, let's take 3 deep breaths together. Inhale, hold at the top. 3, 2, 1. Exhale. Inhale, hold at the top. 3, 2, 1. Exhale. Big inhale. Hold at the top. 3, 2, 1. Long exhale. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So, as usual, the first exercise is to write about this powerful object that was inhabiting the room with you. So remember in the visualization, I said, take your time to understand what it's about and how it makes you feel. And let it show you how it wants to be written, just to refresh your memory. So take around 7 minutes, pause the video, and we'll come back and start reading the poems in our pack. Right, so we're going to start with Priest of the Invisible. Let's see where it is here. Towards the End by our dear friend Kai Kogan. Priest of the Invisible. The poet is the priest of the invisible by Wallace Stevens. It's like we walk around with magnifying glass over our eyes, amplifiers tied to our ears. This close listen, this peer into and hear the infinitesimal movement of cells reaching toward beauty, reaching toward light. And if we use our words to name it, to notice the unnoticed, and make it holy with poem, we consecrate the mundane into the sublime, letter by letter, line by line. I thought this was just such a perfect poem for Poetry as Prayer, obviously because it is called Priest of the Invisible, but also there's this almost simple, subtle, but perfect way of, in my opinion, explaining what we've been doing here. Like what is like as a culmination of the last few weeks, like we have been listening, we have been peering into. I don't know if there's a spot in this poem that particularly reaches you, Kathy.
I think the image of the magnifying glass and then the end, how it's just a little bite or a little morsel that you're looking at under the magnifying glass. It literally looks like a small piece, the way that she has the lines, and it's just letter by letter, line by line, like she's dissecting it almost.
Yeah. Yeah, how it kind of even the shape of the poem
Hmm.
makes you look closer, right?
Right.
The image of the magnifying glass showing you the smallest, the smallest, the smallest.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I just think it's such a heartwarming poem for me
Hmm.
as well.
We love Kai.
Uh, yeah, yeah. I think it's the very first poem in her book as well. I also wanted to read Ars Poetica. Here it is by Catherine Barnett. What can I know? What ought I to do? What may I hope? What is the human being? By Immanuel Kant. To answer Kant's last question, she should take the curtains from her eyes and lay them on the bed. She should stand on her head and dream, empty herself of I, I, I. She should walk inside the living and the dead, become some other passerby. This, in my opinion, is kind of quite the opposite to Kai Kogan's poem because it is complex. Like it's a very short poem, but it's packing a lot of philosophy, these
Mhm.
impossible questions, right? So perhaps this poem is more difficult to connect to. Um, and when I make my packs, I don't just want like the the kind of easier poems, but I want us to think in so many different ways and to realize that we can say the same thing in so many different ways. But also at the same time, this poem is perhaps easy to memorize, right? If we want something, we want the poem we want to embody it, right? We want it to be inside us. Um, it's a snappy poem, and the I, and the rhyme with by, and just, I don't know. I think it lends itself to, I think.
Mm.
Okay. So, with those two very, very different poems in mind, this is the prompt. Imagine that, as a poet, your words hold magical power. Because guess what they do? They can heal, protect, or transform the world around you. And I would like you to write a poem imagining that you're casting a spell. What miracle do you want to create? Perhaps you want to heal, make peace blossom in a troubled place, invite joy into your life or someone else's life. And how, think of also not just writing the spell, but how will the poem work its magic? So try to use very vivid imagery in this one. So take 10 minutes, pause the video, and when we come back, we'll share some more guiding questions. So, this being the very last session of Poetry as Prayer, part one, I prepared some guiding questions and I invite you to pose these questions to the drafts you've written already. So the way we can do it, Kathy, is I asked you to prepare a draft that you've written already, and to share it with me, and then we can tackle the questions after that, so that they kind of don't influence you at this point. So go ahead, please, and if you remember the prompt that you wrote it to and which session it was in, it will help us, understand it better.
I'm looking through my notes.
Mhm.
I think it was kind of influenced by a couple of the sessions. Just even the very first session when we were talking about, what kind of prayers are there. And then in another of the sessions, we talked about prayer and food.
Yeah.
So this is kind of, I feel like, influenced by both of those, and just the feeling of it kind of came out of that. So I'm
Yes.
sorry, I don't remember the exact prompt.
Oh, it's okay. So it's probably session three, I imagine. And we were so in session three, we also spoke about different kinds of gratitude
Mm-hmm.
again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we read the poem by um we read Miss that day and Southern Fried Hymn, and yeah, we read a
Mm-hmm.
few, but I feel like it was also influenced by in the second session, we read, or the first one, we read Catalogue of Ephemera. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it was, yeah, like a mixture of session one and three for you, exactly
Yeah,
like you said.
I think so too. And then in session three, you asked us to write a love letter to ourselves. So that I
Yeah, yeah,
think it's
no,
kind of a combination of that. It's a little bit of a
yeah, I love
hybrid.
that.
Yep, the
Yeah,
hybrid influence.
uh-huh.
All right. You want me to
Go
read it?
ahead.
Okay.
Yes, please.
This is not that kind of poem. This is not a pat on the back. It's lachrymose vapors and shards of onion. No, there, just aromatics and oil. A clove of garlic, a prayer. An acrid woman sharpens her knife. You hear the shing shink of blade on whetstone and think the edge is surely meant for someone else. When she cuts you, it doesn't even hurt until later. But this is your kitchen. When you reach into the wound, your fingers come away stained turmeric and thyme. No one knows you as well as this cast iron pot. Bubble over, bone broth and marrow.
Mm. You know, what I noticed the most in this poem are the contrasts, the kind of the gentleness and the violence
Mm-hmm.
are so mixed in together, which is, very much, if we're honest, like the human the human experience. But uh I think for me, the power of it lies in its like the genuine, you know, two-sidedness of life and the beautiful scents and aromas and textures mixed in with, shards and chopping and wounds and kind
Mm-hmm.
of not knowing who the anger is directed towards, I think gives it a strength. You know, if we knew, then we wouldn't be so involved, I
Mm-hmm.
think, in the poem. So so yeah, well done. It packs a lot. And again, you don't have to use any complicated strategies in your work to already form you are because you are experienced using devices without trying too hard. But even if you weren't as experienced as you are, um there's something about just being clear that already brings the reader in. And clear is not simplistic. It's,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something that you learn with practice. Um, so here are the guiding questions. And as I'm reading these, I'm going to pause a little between the questions because there are a few. And I invite you to also pause the video between each one. I'm not going to say it each time, but um, do it with intention, as though you, or not as though, have your poem in front of you, and you can repeat these questions for each of your poems. You can, today in this session, do it on the one poem, but then go back and work on different ones, and this is like just a set of questions that you can use on a poem in general, but especially they're especially targeted towards these poems that we've been writing. So here goes. What emotions or changes do you want to inspire in your reader? And I would add with this, what emotions or changes do you want to inspire in yourself? Remember that if you are bored, the reader is bored. It really is that quite simple like that. Which words or phrases feel like powerful incantations when you say them aloud? How can sensory details like sight, sound, touch make the magic feel real? What does holding a pen or typing words make you feel? Does the poem give you a new perspective or act as a release for emotion? Which metaphor could you use to describe what poetry means to you? This last one is particularly directed to the exercise we did earlier. And for the very last exercise, we're going to go back to the first poem that influenced us or took us by the hand or like made us notice poetry. And I'm going to share with you one of, if not the first, but definitely one of the first poems that I remember having in my childhood bedroom, right? Like printing it out and keeping it there as I don't even know if I looked at it as a poem purely. I kind of looked at it as a kind of manifesto for life at the time. You learn. This so Borges is more known for his philosophy than for his poetry, so this is you might be a surprise to some people, but this is a poem by Borges. After a while, you learn the subtle difference between holding a hand and chaining a soul. You learn that love doesn't mean leaning and company doesn't mean security. And you begin to learn that kisses aren't contracts and presents aren't promises. And you begin to accept your defeats with your head up and your eyes open, with the grace of a woman, not the grief of a child. And you learn to build all your roads on today because tomorrow's ground is too uncertain for plans, and future have a way of falling down in mid-flight. After a while, you learn that even sunshine burns if you get too much. So you plant your garden and decorate your own soul instead of waiting for someone to bring you flowers. And you learn that you really can endure, that you really are strong, and you really do have worth. And you learn and learn with every goodbye you learn. It's for me like the poem of poems in a way. Like it's really, I know I love a lot of poems, so I think might have said that before, but this really was the first poem I discovered as a little girl, and the fact that it said with the grace of a woman, not the grief of a child in there, even though it was written by a man, like really made me feel seen.
Mm-hmm.
that's just the word. It really made me feel like this poet was seeing me. So I invite you to think of this whatever poem, if you can remember, or whatever earliest poem you can remember, let's put it that way, because you might not remember your very first poem that you discovered, and maybe it wasn't that important. Maybe an important one came later, right? For me, this was an important one. And I kept remembering, and it took me a while to like find it again when I was doing this course. I'm like, what was that poem? Like what was I remember you really can endure and you grow your own garden. I'm like, it's not Taylor Swift, right? So because we're talking about a very long time ago. Yeah, so think of this poem, if it comes to mind, or even if not one particular poem comes to mind, think of just how whatever poem it was made you feel and why you feel pulled to it. Like for me, I feel pulled, and I think a lot of people will say the same thing because I feel seen and it gave me kind of instructions for life, right?
Mhm.
That's how I felt. Um, and it gave me a reason to write because I want others to feel that way when they read my poem. It inspired, this idea that poetry itself can be a miracle, can be, and very apt. That's kind of, I'm saying this now because like we close our course with just this feeling of capturing these little miracles in our lives and making sense of the chaos and having this structure, the scaffolding of poetry. And, you know, this is a course that begins and ends, but I think what's important and what I want everybody to keep is, hey, poetry can be one of my structures. Poetry can be a foundation, it can hold me up. Um, So, as a last exercise, reflect on how this writing and how, whether you're a beginner or you're a seasoned poet, like just think of doing your writing with so much intention that wherever you are, you can feel that you are creating a small act of something extraordinary.
Mhm.
And we put, we're all using the same words, and we can invent words, we can invent rhythms and poetry, but we are all pulling from something ordinary and making it extraordinary. So thank you so much for participating in Poetry as Prayer. I think for me to date, this is like the most precious thing that I've managed to put together. And I appreciate that it can help others. So thank you, Kathy, for being in this. Um, and there will be more. There will be more. So keep writing and keep using poetry as your biggest friend and solace because God knows it's more reliable than so many other things we do. Okay. Thank you so, so much. And I'll see you soon.